Today I'm going to be tinkering around with making my own flux. Not that I have any shortage of fluxes around here. I have this paste flux here. I have this kind of paste flux here. I've got a couple of liquid fluxes here, but I got this little chunk of resin, or rosin. I've got a couple of different alcohols here, both 99.9% concentration, so as pure as you're going to get without going to a chemistry supply place. And I am simply going to, like I said, try and make my own and just compare it against these other ones. I'm thinking that these two pastes are very, very similar. These two liquids, one is labeled as Kester. I don't know if it actually is or not because I got it, from a random Chinese seller on eBay. This other one is branded Yosker, and again, I don't know what its provenance is or anything else. So, well, we'll give this little experiment a try. From what I've read, you need the concentration to be somewhere in the 25 to 40% range. So I'm going to do that by volume rather than by weight because I don't have a set of scales. Well, I mean, I could borrow my wife's kitchen scales, but she doesn't want them anywhere near solder because I use lead-based solder. And I can't really blame her for that. I'm not entirely sure what the best way to crush this is, but I know this hitting it with a hammer is probably fairly effective. You don't have to crush it, I don't think, but in order for it to dissolve effectively, I think you probably want it in relatively small pieces. So I will just bash away on it like this and see how much I come up with. I suppose the better way to do this would be to use a mortar and pestle or something like that, but of course I am not prepared with that kind of high-tech lab experiment equipment. I think this should work very well, at least, like I said, at least for initial experiments here anyway, just to see what happens. So let's see how much of that we got. So to my eye, that comes out just shy of 5 milliliters. I realize milliliters is a liquid measure and this is a dry powder, but milliliters, cubic centimeters, it's close enough for the rough experiment that I'm doing. So I think I will add that to about 20 milliliters of, well, we'll start with methyl hydrate, methyl alcohol initially, just to see how that works. So that will be 5 in 20, which, what is that? 5 in 50 would be 10%, 5 in 25 would be a 25%. In 20, that's going to be, just shy of a 20%. We'll start there and we'll see what happens. Yes, I know my chemistry equipment is wanting, but this is an electronics channel, not a chemistry channel. So that dissolved in there fairly well, nice and frothy. By the way, for those of you who recognize what this is, yes, it's clean. It's never been used for its intended purpose. Okay, well, let's pour that off into one of these bottles and we'll see if it does anything. So should I try that one first and then see what happens, or should I make some other mixes up? And yeah, I think maybe I will make up the same mix in isopropyl and see if that does anything different. Let me just go and clean this stuff out and I'll be right back. Just crush myself up some more resin, I don't know. Don't bust me on pronunciation. Tell me what you think down below though if you feel like it. Just don't complain, because honestly, for what I'm doing here, pronunciation is the least of my worries. Okay, there's about the same 5 milliliters again, or, So this time I'll put in 20 milliliters of isopropyl alcohol, IPA, for those of you who prefer that abbreviation. Myself, I prefer that abbreviation to be reserved for beer. And same as before, I'll dump that all in, put the lid on and give it a good shake, and then put it into another bottle. This is interesting. Even with quite a bit of agitation, that is still not fully dissolved. It didn't dissolve nearly as fast as it did in the methyl hydrate and methyl alcohol. Interesting. I'm going to keep agitating this for a while longer, much longer, and just see what happens, if it will ever dissolve properly. Right, it's been about 5 minutes of constant agitation, and it appears to have finally dissolved everything. So that's one strike against isopropyl as the alcohol of choice for this. But we will continue the experiment and see if it's actually effective. If it makes a better flux, then well, maybe the extra time's worth it. Alright, well I redid the math, and that works out to actually 25%. So good for me, I guess. That's pretty much right in the middle of the range. But after settling for a while, I see that the methyl hydrate solution has got a bit of precipitate in it. The isopropyl doesn't yet, but it was made much more recently. So I guess this is going to be a shake well before use kind of a thing. Let's get some circuit boards in here just to play with. I've got one of these surface mount kits. I've got a couple of boards that I've been experimenting with on the laser. So they've got some corrosion and stuff, and I haven't cleaned them or anything. I've been experimenting with different masks and stuff like that. So we'll see if we can stick some solder to that. And then I've got just the venerable old 555 and 4017 kit board that I will throw a couple of LEDs onto just as an experiment. And again, I'm not going to pre-clean this or anything. I'm just going to see what happens. And we'll try some different solders. I've got some Kester 6040 here. It's 1.2 millimeters, so quite thick, and it does have a rosin core already in it. I've got some MG Chemical, which is 0.032 inches or 0.7 millimeters. And then I have this really, really cheap, really horrible solder that I got from a random place on eBay. It claims to be a 6337, and it is 0.5 millimeters thick. So we'll try two decent brand solders and one completely crap solder and see what happens. So just to keep this fair, I have cleaned my soldering tip the best I can with, where is my soldering tip cleaner stuff? The cats are guarding it. This stuff here. And it does a pretty good job of cleaning. It's like lots of flux and a little bit of solder balls in there. Plus I've run it over the brass wool cleaning stuff several times. So let's just see with the heavy duty solder here. Takes a bit longer to melt. That's not bad. Let's try with the MG. I'll come down a couple here. It's a much lighter solder and it melts a lot quicker. Okay. Clean my tip. We'll try with this mystery Chinese solder. Yeah, that's about what it's always been like. I don't even think it has flux in it. So far, that is the Kester. That's the MG. I put a little bit too much on. And that is the no-name stuff. Yuck. So now I'm going to try all three of them with my homemade methyl hydrate flux. I'll just douse it in there and repeat with the same solder on each one. Come on. A lot of smoke. There, that goes on there. That's the Kester. This is the MG. And again, it's not really that fair because they're much different thicknesses of solder. And this is the no-name generic one. Yeah, it's still horrible. Come on, why won't you even melt? Well, that's less bad, I think. It's still a pain in the ass, it's still horrible solder, but as everybody says, a bit of flux makes even the worst solder better. Let's try the same thing with the isopropyl. I'm just going to go to the ones in between here, put a good dollop on there. So again, this is the Kester. That melted a lot faster this time. Clean the tip. This is the MG. That worked pretty well. Clean my tip again. I'll give this horrible stuff all the chances in the world. Give it an extra dose of flux. Get in there. Come on. Come on. There is the generic one with the IPA. There is, yeah, that's the MG with the IPA flux. And that is the Kester with the IPA flux. Let's try with the paste flux, the commercially made paste flux, using this applicator. The one benefit of paste flux is it stays where you put it until it gets hot. It doesn't evaporate quite as quickly. So maybe that's a good thing? I don't know, we'll see. So again, with the Kester, okay, that flowed very nice. With the MG, and that flowed very nice, and I got a little bit too much in there. And now with the cheap junk, it just doesn't want to melt. There, that's in. There is the Kester. There is the MG. And there is the no-name stuff with the paste flux. You know, I think this homemade stuff is working just about as well as the commercial stuff, really. That surprises me, and I guess impresses me a little bit. Let's try with this Yosker flux pen. It's quite liquidy as well, so I'm not going to be able to get it you know, to stay exactly where I put it. And let's just try again with our 3 solders. There is the Kester. There is the MG. Why didn't that work? I didn't put enough in there. And here is the no-name. And again, it's just being horrible to melt. But really, the 3 of them all look pretty good. This no-name one, because it's a different alloy, it always is a little bit duller on the finish, but the flux did its job. So that is interesting. My homemade 25-ish% stuff seems to work just as well as the commercially made stuff in this application. So let's see what we can do on this kind of grody looking uncleaned board here. I don't even know what all that pollution is. So let's start with, oh, there's the IPA. Let's start with that one. Let's put a blob of it down there. And I think I'm just going to use my MG solder from here on out, because I didn't see any reason not to do anything different. So there we go. That took fairly well, actually. Wow. I'm just going to do the same experiment on a part of the board that I didn't put flux on. Oh, okay. So that worked just as well. I guess the flux inside the solder helps. Well, whatever crud is over there is not working very well. That could have to do with just the type of crud that's on there. Also, I mean, it's a huge piece of copper, so. Anyway, let's try over here with the methyl hydrate version. There's also going to be some cooling with the evaporation. Now that took nicely too. And then without, just down in this corner. I think the one with the methyl hydrate flux did a little bit better than the one with no flux. Or again, with just the flux core of the solder. And for those of you who are wondering about, remember that laser engraver that I got a while ago? I have been trying to use it to etch circuit boards, and I can sort of do it with a resist and stuff, but my biggest problem now is getting my head around circuit board CAD software, because as you can see, that didn't work at all. But that's not the main point of this video, so we'll just ignore that for now. One other thing I want to try is desoldering. This is an ancient circuit board. I don't even know exactly what it's from. The QC sticker says 122391. This is several decades old. The solder is going to be old and crusty. So let's just see what desoldering looks like. Now normally when I'm using solder wick, I will dip it into this paste flux tub and just melt some flux into the wick so that it's got a good chance of desoldering. So let's see if we can take some of the solder off this up here with this wick and that paste flux. This is not the best wick in the world either, but it does seem to be picking up some solder until it gets saturated anyway. So that's good. And that's normally what I do. But let's chop that piece off. And let's try this with our homemade stuff. I'm trying a different pin over here. I think I need this to be held. Hang on. That's one downside with liquid flux, is you need your board to actually be flat so that it doesn't drain off. But we'll put a good sized puddle over here and grab the same wick and see what happens. Does that pick up any more or less solder? To my eye, it looks like they do about the same amount. It comes down a little bit to technique too, though. Should we try with the isopropyl one? Splooge a bunch onto there as usual, and give it what for. Here's one with lots of solder on it to work with. Now then, these are huge tracks and big pins, so it takes quite a bit of heat to melt it out. Well, in that test, I don't think the isopropyl did as well as the methyl or the paste. It didn't pick up quite as much. I mean, it still picked up some. It's better than with no flux at all. But that's interesting. And of course, either alcohol will work to clean up the flux residue, which makes sense because it's the solvent that the flux was made with, so it's obviously going to be the flux or the solvent that will dissolve it and clean it up too. So that isn't really a surprise, but I guess it's useful information. I was going to try one last experiment using solder paste and a heat gun and some surface mount, but unfortunately my solder paste is all crusty and dry, so I've squirted some of the flux, which is 75% alcohol, into this paste, and I'm trying to loosen it up, but I don't think I can get it. Well, maybe. It looks not bad. We'll try and daub some on there. I don't think this is going to work, and it isn't really the experiment that I wanted to try, but we'll try it anyway. Just drop that onto there. Kind of holds well. And then we'll bring some hot air in and blew the component away. That's not performance. Anyway, try that again. I'll hold the component in place. It doesn't get blown away this time. Maybe my reconstituted solder paste is not pasty enough. Anyway, we'll see what happens here. See if we can get it to reflow. Oh, looks like it's trying. Okay, we'll let that cool down and take a closer look at it. Now there's not nearly enough solder on that side and it kind of blobbed up. But this side worked. Now that the component's held in place a little bit, let's just do a little bit of rework here and give it some more liquid flux. Rework that side. Maybe carry in just a little bit of solder on the iron. Let's see how that looks. Now I got too much solder on it, but it is definitely in place. So maybe this stuff does help. I mean, flux obviously helps, but this stuff seems to do the job. And while I'm sure I could do a lot more experiments and try a lot more things, I think that is enough for now. 25-ish% by approximation seems to be reasonable. It's got more color to it than the commercial liquid flux. It's got a similar type of color to the commercial paste fluxes. And yeah, I think that's not bad. Wonder if, no, some of these seem to have been coming out of solution a little bit, so I have to keep shaking them. I was thinking that maybe I could just make a saturated solution with what I have left over there. I've still got a little bit of solid rosin left. I might experiment with that in the future, or I might just use it to make more. But I think I'm going to leave it there for now and see what the comments have to say for themselves, because I'm sure there are opinions about what I've done. I can probably safely ignore the opinions about my hack labware using just what I had on hand for that. But the actual process, the flux itself, have you made your own before? Do you have a formula that would work better than approximately 25%? Let me know down in the comments. Anyway, you may have noticed the lack of beverage here. I figured since I was splashing chemicals around, that might not be the wisest thing. But be assured that I will be cracking one open to help with the editing process later. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.